Morning.
Morning.
How's everybody doing?
Doing all right. How about you?
Good. Do we have quorum, Todd?
I'm just double checking.
All right.
Yeah, we do.
All right. My watch says 11:30. Let's get started. Welcome, everybody. Today is February 10th, 11:30. This is our executive board meeting for the MPO. We'll call this meeting to order. Item number 2 is approval of the agenda.
Move it.
Second.
Second, Steve.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 3 is vote on the approval of the meeting minutes for January 13th. Any comment about that?
Just got one comment. My name's spelled incorrectly in a couple places in there.
Sorry, Gary, I should have caught that. We'll clean it up.
Move approval subject to correcting Gary's name.
Second.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 4 is consent vote on contract and expenses. Todd, you're going to give us a brief update on that.
Yep. The first two items for your approval. The first item is the data we use for the container locator. We're working also with the company on that to get some private funding on moving forward in future data purchases, so that price will drop down, but that's to keep it current. And then the second is to Davis Law Firm. This is the special legal services, primarily the transload research and special meetings, finishing up all the work on that through December, essentially. So I'd recommend approval on both items. Happy to answer any questions.
Todd.
Thanks, Todd.
This is Sarah. I just, offline, I would like to see a line item listing from Davis Law Firm on those meetings, just so I can look at that and have an understanding of where and how time was being allocated. But otherwise, I have nothing else on this item.
Sure, I can do that.
Any other discussion? All right. This is a voting item.
I'll
Move
vote.
to approve. Stephanie.
Is there a second?
Second by Sarah.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 5 is a presentation for the fiscal year 2020 audit. I believe we all got a report just recently. Full disclosure, the gentleman that's Dave Ellis works for Denman and Company. He handles everything for Barada's restaurant. So I just want to put that out there. I don't believe I have a conflict. Scott, you can weigh in if you'd like, but Denman has done my books for 27 years at Barada's. So I just wanted to put that out there. Todd, you want to take over?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And I agree. I don't think there's a conflict. Dave and Joe Sparks is also on the line. We'll run through some of the audit and the findings. Essentially, a clean audit, some things to clean up, and they'll go over those. One is segregation of duties, and we had a meeting yesterday with Sarah to kind of go over a game plan for those. So we'll talk about that as well. But I'll let Dave and Joe go through the audit. One last thing, we did send out something this morning. They'd updated a little bit of the text in the audit, so we sent that out to everyone just a little while ago to give you the latest copy, but it hadn't changed substantially. Go ahead, Dave.
All right. Again, my name is Dave Ellis. I'm a partner here at Denman and Company. Joe Sparks did most of the work. He's on the call also, but we appreciate being selected as your auditor. The independent audit report is on the third page of your packet. The financial statements are responsibility of management of the MPO. Our responsibility as auditors is to express opinions on the financial statements. We conducted the audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. At the bottom of that page 3 is our opinion. In our opinion, the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects. As we'll talk about shortly, is that we did have quite a few adjustments this year, so we did have some recommendations to have some additional training on QuickBooks, but those are similar adjustments to what were made in the prior year also. I'm not going to go over a whole lot of the numbers because obviously it's back to June 30th of 2020. I'm going to really skip back to the findings. We do what's called a uniform guidance audit, which is due to your federal awards of over $750,000. So we test that program, which is listed on page 36 of your report. It's the Iowa Department of Transportation Highway Planning and Construction Program. You spent about $975,000 in that program during the year. We did test that for compliance with the various federal requirements, and we did not find any compliance issues there. We did identify internal control issues, both related to your financial statements and the federal audit portion. As Todd mentioned, the first significant or material weakness in your internal control is your segregation of duties. I know there's some recommendations as far as having some other people be involved in those duties and try and sign off or at least review some of the transactions that are being recorded by Tracy and getting those a little bit more defined duties there. The other item, control deficiency, was that your staff does not have the training to do the financial statements themselves. But we did identify some receivables, payables, and prepaids and capital assets that weren't properly recorded when we started the audit. We worked with management and made sure that in these financial statements they are recorded, but we proposed the audit adjustments to get those recorded. So going forward, we believe staff needs to be properly trained on QuickBooks to help ensure that those entries are not made going forward. One other item that we identify was that you did exceed your budget during the year, and we recommend that those budgets are amended before you do exceed the amounts. And then we did have a recommendation to update your travel policy to make sure it's including your employee manual and that it's followed each time. So again, it was a unmodified opinion on financial statements with those two material weaknesses. The one material weakness with segregation of duties also goes over to your federal programs. That's throughout your whole accounting system there. So that's probably one you're not going to get rid of completely, but I think there's some areas that you can strengthen those controls and make it better going forward. That's a real brief summary of a 40-page almost 50-page document. Any questions, anything else that you would like me to go over today?
And just to add on and then open for questions, that as I mentioned, we met with Sarah and some staff yesterday, and based on the findings that Joe and Dave found in the audit, the bullets on the screen there are what we're recommending to do to help address the findings. So add a reconciliation statement to the financial statements for the exec committee. We'll send a copy of the bank statements to the Secretary Treasurer. Training, as Joe mentioned. We'll update the travel policy that we have, and then include the build grants in the MPO budget as a line item, probably a little separate from our regular budget stuff, but to show that it's in there, and we have that later on in the presentation. And then evaluate administrative finance needs with staffing, within staffing. So we'll be bringing some other recommendations forward in the coming months.
Todd and Joe, if I could real quick, I just wanted to add that the finance subcommittee did meet last week to review this and heard a more in-depth presentation from Dave and had a discussion about it, a lot of which led to the steps you see here.
Yep.
And if it would be helpful for anybody, we can bring the audit up on screen here if we want to get into any specific pages or anything like that. So that's available to you as well.
And I'll just speak quickly. And Dave and Joe, thank you for your work on this and for answering all of our finance committee questions. I think we spent 45 minutes on the audit. So exact, it was a very thorough review. And, you know, then yesterday, Todd, Dylan, Zach, and I had a really good conversation about thoughtful, actionable steps that can demonstrate to the full board that, yes, we continue to take our finances seriously, and especially any recommendations from our auditor. And we will demonstrate to the board how we are working on those items. There was one item that came up in our finance committee meeting that I did not think would be a good use of time to bring forward to exec. And I just want to share with you with full transparency. A member of the finance team recommended that staff go back through the last 10 years of audits and look through how many times certain items or recommendations were being made. And given the history of our past auditor and why we have switched, one, I have some concerns with reviewing some of their past audits, but also recognizing staff time. I didn't think it would be wise for them to tally up any comments from the past years, but instead with a strong list of recommendations for exec and for policy to demonstrate the actions that we are taking. And I will say, I sympathize with the team at the MPO for having to deal with governmental accruing practices. It's very difficult. They're on multiple fiscal years dealing with our own fiscal year, the federal budget, and state DOT budget. And I am very supportive of the right financial tools and expertise that we need. And I think it would also take some weight off of their plates because they are not finance experts. And it would really help position the MPO with current and future projects financially by having a financial expert, either as a consultant or on the team or whatever the committee decides is appropriate. But it is very complicated, as you all know from dealing with your own budgets. And I'm very pleased with these recommendations that we're bringing forward to correct any items in our audit.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Stephanie. I have a comment. When I read this audit, a lot of this kind of duplicates what Sarah just said, but it is frustrating for me that for all the time I've been involved with the MPO, consistently we fail the financial reporting and segregation of duties. And I know that steps have been taken in the past for the segregation duties thing. I know it's a small firm, but also every year the response is we will get training. We will work on this, and it doesn't make sense financially to bring in somebody. And I think at some point, with the organization growing and with the complexity of things like the build grant and having a bank loan and money flowing through us, that we really need to get this right. Hiring an accountant to do whatever it is that isn't right, you know, whether you need to hire them to do payroll, you know, the MPO can set up the bank accounts, but have the other accountant do the checks. There are firms that do that and they don't cost that much. But I think either the training that we're giving staff isn't effective, we need a different training, or, you know, as Sarah said, nobody expects the MPO staff members to be accountants. You're not accountants, so we don't want you to be accountants. But if the accounting work isn't being done properly, at some point we need to address it instead of continually saying every year, that's okay, we'll get training and, you know, we'll send financial statements. I think last year we sent more to the finance committee than we did in prior years, but nothing ever changes. So I'm concerned, and that's my frustration. And I would encourage or request, I guess, that staff look into what would it cost to hire a third-party accounting firm. You know, there's a lot of small firms that will do this to take care of the part that isn't being done correctly.
Stephanie, I think you're going to like some of our conversations we're going to share during our budget update.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I would just say we're looking into doing some of that, and how that would roll out. So as we talked with Sarah yesterday, that was one of the comments I made, is that we'll come back with kind of a plan on how to address this from a couple different ways, with bringing potentially in some outside assistance on this particular
Okay.
item.
Great. Thank you.
I don't think we'll ever get away from the segregation of duties comment completely, though, just because of the size we are.
I'm not as concerned with segregation of duties if you have a third party in there who is also looking at things. Like I said, the MPO can be setting up the bank accounts, but somebody else should be writing the checks. There needs to be a third party, to me, somebody removed from the MPO looking at this stuff.
Chair, I completely agree with Sarah and Stephanie, and I think it's great that we kind of have this on the record before we accept the audit. And I'll look forward to Sarah's comments when we talk about the budget, but this is one of those reminders that the MPO is really the board. It's just the board hires the staff to do the work. So this is all a reflection on us and the way that we've allocated, funds to manage the organization. And I think Dave and Joe do a great job. Denman's a great firm. They've done our BBB audit before, and they're on our board. They're the highest rated accounting firm in the metro. So we're lucky that we have their review and honesty. And we sure appreciate it, Dave, Joe. But I do think it's time we allocate funds the way the board really needs to see them done. So these kind of comments can be removed from future audits.
All very good comments. We'll continue, I believe, the conversation unless there's any other comments on item 12 under our quarterly budget. And we'll continue, hopefully be able to make some of these changes. Todd, we will see, obviously, an amendment to the budget with some of these changes in there. I know that was one of the recommendations that Denman gave. So I assume that we'll see that relatively soon on the next agenda, or?
Well, we have a placeholder in the budget for some additional staff, whether that's, staff we have in-house or contract. So it's already in the budget.
No, I think with some of the discrepancies as far as being over budget and we needed to come back and amend it, when do we intend on doing that?
We've amended the budget, but yeah, we'll have those. Most of that's already corrected, Joe, because we made these corrections already, but any additional ones we'll have in a future next month or when we approve the budget in April would be the time to true everything.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions for Dave and Joe? Dave, thank you for your expertise as always. Appreciate you and Denman, and I think as many of us pointed out, your company reputation is awesome. So we appreciate you taking a look. And I would echo some of Sarah and Stephanie's comments that we definitely look at a third party, and looking forward to some of the conversations later on in the agenda about it. So, let's take a time. I think we move on to item 6, which is a report and vote on the executive director's annual review and compensation adjustment. Sarah, I think you're going to give us a little bit of an update. And then if Supervisor McCoy and Councilman Weaver want to jump in, that would be great.
Okay, so just to kind of the process, which was light in the memo, the three of us, Matt McCoy, myself, and Ted Weaver, were a part of the review. We had a key area form for the director's review, which is where he was ranked on a scale from 1 to 5 by each of us, and then comments included of strengths and opportunities for improvement under each category. Then all scores were combined and averaged for a total. And we went through the review and then had a conversation with, as a group first, to discuss what comments we had. Then we requested objectives from the director to include in his review to be recognized and brought forward during his next review, which is actually coming up very quickly. One item of note is we need to make sure that we are back on track for reviewing him by the end of the fiscal year, so by June, to align with the rest of the staff reviews. So that item is going to come up again very quickly, and I know Joe will be looking for members to be on that review committee, and we recognized in Todd's review that these objectives will be not finalized by the time for his next review, but mostly an update as to where he's at with many of them. An important item for the review is that the three of us discussed moving forward with a matrix tied with review increases, as many of our other cities have, the frameworks we have in place at other municipalities. Right now, it's very arbitrary, 3 people sitting down, making a recommendation. It's not fair to the board or to the director to be basing it off of this process. And so a top priority that we set for the director, that before any reviews can be concluded at the end of this fiscal year, is we need to have a matrix in place and assigned, so to be able to provide for better parameters and process moving forward. We did request from the director what the average salary increase was during this last process. It ranged from 3 to 5%, and the committee did settle on 4% recommended increase for the director. With that, I invite either Supervisor McCoy or Councilman Weaver to make any comments or anything I missed with this quick update.
Gentlemen, anything?
Sarah, I think you hit the high points, and I concur that that this was long overdue, and I hope that the chair will find a new committee next year to deal with the upcoming review. So because I think I've worn out my welcome. I've been on the last 2, so it's time for some new blood.
Yeah, I would agree with all that, and it was a pretty thorough process, and Sarah did a great job in leading it up and making sure we included everything that we needed to, and that it was very thorough. So yeah.
So and I was able just to sit in at the last meeting with Todd, and as I go through the executive review, and it was very thorough, and I want to thank the 3 of you for, I know it was a lot of extra time. I know it's not a fun thing to do. I was on there for a couple of years. It's just not, it's not a great thing to do. But there's one thing on here that there's two comments that I have. The last paragraph of the review page gives him a score of 3.36. But we're going to give him a 4% raise. And I have no problem with the 4% increase. What I do have a problem with is the next time as we go through, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, that's basically a C, even almost a C minus at that point, if you look at it on a scale from A, B, and C, at 5 being the A. So my concern is, as we go forward, if Todd scores a 4 or a 5, does that mean we're looking at a 7 or an 8% increase as far as that goes? So I just think we need to be concerned about the number that's listed on this review, and then what we're doing with that number. Also, Todd brought it to my attention in his contract. There is a $2,000 allowance for life insurance. And Todd, through the small pot that we have of employees, is unable, with some of his health issues, to get life insurance. You know, but he hasn't been able to get the $2,000 either. So as I would recommend to you, anyone else sitting in that seat, we would be paying $2,000 for life insurance for them. I think that Todd is entitled to that dollar amount, however we want to give to him, however he thinks, if he can go get it on by himself or he wants to invest it. Todd is entitled to that $2,000. And I think those two comments, I'd just like a little feedback from everybody and see where we're at. But I would like to recommend that that's part of this review and part of his compensation, that $2,000 he's entitled to, and we should give that to him.
So Joe, with respect to your first comment, I agree with you. That's kind of the intent of the salary matrix, is that it becomes very transparent, and based off of whatever your score is, you can fall within the matrix. And that matrix should, you know, whether it's tied to the CPI or however we decide to flesh it out, it becomes a very clear process that isn't arbitrary, as Sarah had mentioned, and ideally can be used for the entire staff. I mean, that's how we do it at our city. Everyone understands the rules of the game going in, and then based off of the output of the review, here's where your salary increase is, as opposed to just saying, okay, well, everyone's 3 to 5, so we're just going to give you a 4, right? Which is kind of the way it worked this year.
Again, just one comment on the $2,000. I don't have a problem doing something with that, but I would suggest that, I mean, Todd's a smart guy. He's not going to go out and buy bubble gum with $2,000, but I would suggest that we have some method of mutual agreement on what's going to happen to that, instead of just writing a check for $2,000. You know, whether we go out and find somebody that will start an annuity and then somehow every year, whatever, we put that money into that annuity, which is, you know, if the life insurance is unavailable, it just seems to me that there should be something a little more structured.
Yeah.
And unless Todd thinks he can go out and buy it on his own, but I assume if that was an opportunity, or if that was available, you would have done that. But
Yeah,
I just thought that if we can set up some sort of annuity so we can track that, otherwise it's just, and nothing specific to Todd, but otherwise it's just going to go to consider salary, in my opinion. But
Well,
Gary,
and this
however
is-
we want to do it, I'm fine with that. I just know that he's entitled to the $2,000. Well, however we want to do it, anyone else sitting in that seat, that's a benefit that we would be given to them.
Well,
And just
this-
because of his health issues doesn't mean that he doesn't get it.
This is Sarah, and I just have kind of a twofold comment question here. You know, I'm a firm believer that contracts are in place for a reason, and we have them for directors, our own city managers, that when we begin to move outside the bounds of a contract, in my opinion, we undermine public trust. And so I'm a firm believer in following the contract. I'm always happy to renegotiate and relook at it, but also having a conversation around a $2,000 bonus is a different conversation. I'm not saying that that's the words you've used, Joe, but if that's the conversation.
No, it's not a bonus.
If that's the conversation that the board wants to have, we should have that. But then my actual second question is to legal, because this wasn't listed on the agenda, can we actually take action on it and vote, because the only recommendation was a 4% increase?
I don't think you can take action on that additional piece at this time.
Okay.
This is Stephanie. I'm okay with the general concept of, you know, the 2,000 is in the contract. I agree with Sarah and Gary. I mean, I would like it to be a little bit more structured, or at least if we need to renegotiate the contract for that item, let's do that, and let's figure out how we get a benefit that works for Todd. But just giving $2,000 just seems to me kind of, I can't think of the right word. It's not underhanded, but it just doesn't seem like it's very transparent. It's like we just decided to go out and take the 2,000 and use it for something else. So I don't object with the general concept. I just think we should document it and be a little bit more structured.
Joe is chair, and I believe, because you mentioned this to me before, that you've had a conversation with Todd about it. I'd feel comfortable compromising that maybe as part of the action to wrap this up, we agree to it at this time, but that it's a one-time expense until we can build it into the contract or create a benefit such as Gary recommends. But it on issues of eligibility for benefits, and I speak kind of personally because my wife has been through this herself. As health goes up and down, I think we need to bend towards flexibility and come back and make sure we only do it once right now till we build it into his contract or into a program that lives on past 2021. But I appreciate your recommendation, Joe, for the $2,000, and I would support it this time as a way to keep moving forward and have the review committee take it up next year and look at the contract.
Yeah, we can do that because the review committee is going to have to be organized by July 1st and go through another review to get him back on the where we need to be as far as reviewing the process. So I'm fine if we want to do the review process, but I can't. I'm surprised this hasn't been brought up before.
To be fair to the committee, that was probably more on me because I was just trying to shop for insurance, going through a number of different providers and brokers, and it all came up the same. So that's why then I brought it to you, Joe. So.
Okay.
Stephanie again. I just have one question on the review itself for the committee. So there's two sections. There's proposed goals from the executive director, and then there's a goal worksheet for special projects. So is all of that goals for Todd for the year?
So the section with special projects from the executive director are the kind of key projects that are being worked on at the MPO, and the original objectives that are listed towards the bottom of that sheet from the strategic plan. So a kind of continuous projects, ongoing projects. Okay, so my only comment is there's one that it's 4.4.3.1. It's not written as a goal. It just says what the MPO should do. So I think in order to make it achievable for Todd, it'd be probably helpful for him to have what is his specific action for that goal. Yeah, and that was kind of hard, Stephanie, because those items were pulled directly from the strategic plan. We recognize that this is overarching work that the director lead and work with his team on. That's why I asked for the special projects goals to be measurable and tangible, because really this is based on his leadership and guidance that he is bringing the board through, as well as his team. And it also will help, going into this next process, being able to refine and continue to make this process better for Todd by having the actionable goals. And so I chose to only really focus on the top ones that have been a priority of the board instead of going through the rest of the strategic plan items that we're all working on anyway.
So Sarah, as Ted commented, so the 3.36, that is the matrix where there you would base the 4% off of. So if someone scores a 2, then it's 2%.
No,
So that's not it.
No, we do not have a matrix today. There's nothing that exists, and it's up to 3 individuals to sit back, rate the director, and provide a recommendation, which is why we have said before the next round of reviews, a matrix must be implemented for the organization, because this is far too arbitrary and it needs to be clean and precise. And I know we talked about a staff matrix when we did salary reviews, either 18 months, 2 years ago. I can't recall how long ago that was. And so now we have made it very clear that this is an absolute objective that has to occur before moving forward with next reviews.
And who's going to come up with that matrix? We are?
You know,
Todd is?
we're developing it. We've got some examples. Ted shared City of Clive's example. We'll modify that with what we already have in place for staff, and combine that and bring it back to you probably next month.
Okay. I just want to know, because I've got to appoint 3 more people by July, and they're going to want to know how to put the matrix in place and to do the detailed work that, you know, we're asking them to do. I still think it's troubling, the 3.36 as his number, and we're going to give him, you know, between a 3 and 5% raise. We're giving him a 4% raise. So I mean, I don't get that, but that's fine. I mean, that's what you guys decided to do. Any other comments or questions?
I appreciate the work of the committee too. I support it. I'd like to add the $2,000 for just 2021 to be evaluated or embedded in the contract next round. You know, some of the goal points from the strategic plan are a little concerning to me, that we don't go off in a tangent that the executive committee and the board haven't bought into. So I think ongoing communication about this, and I think we'll get to it in the budget as well when we do the unified work plan as to how we're allocating our time. But I just want to make sure that we don't dive into, and I'm thinking about important things in the community like affordable housing and stormwater runoff, but those aren't, you know, the core of our mission at the MPO, which is transportation. I want to make sure that when we look at those, it's always in light of the transportation impact, and that we're not setting out to develop the expertise to lead that for the Metro. Those issues have leaders.
Now, I would also include, and we're going to touch on this, the economic development. You know, we all have, or most of us have, economic development folks on staff. And so as we get down to item number 11, that also needs to have some discussion of how the economic development district is going to be part of the MPO's core, you know, what we're going to do when we're transportation, and that's what we should be focusing on. But we'll touch on that as we go further down the list. So item number 6 is a report. Is a report and vote, and I haven't heard anyone move it. Did you move that, Coleman, or?
I don't want to offend Sarah or the committee, but I would move the committee work if one of them didn't want to.
I'll second it.
Go ahead, Matt. Why don't you make the motion?
I'll move it with the, it's my understanding we're moving it with a one-time $2,000 allotment on this one.
I'm not
I-
sure you can add the allotment. I think
Okay.
Mayor Sarah
So-
had raised that earlier, that I
So that
think
would
that
have,
it's not been noticed.
okay. All right. So move the recommendation at the 4% level and the report that has been shared with the body.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I,
Opposed? Abstention, motion passes. Item number 7 is report and vote on the election calendar year of 2021 officers. Todd?
Yeah, thank you. We put together a nominating committee for the next year's officers. The committee was Matt McCoy, Bob Andwig, Stephanie Riva. They met and discussed the slate of officers. And I don't know if any of the committee want to speak on the slate, or I can finish it. Not that it's changed a whole lot. But I'll go ahead, and they recommend the same slate of officers that we currently have. Joe as chair, Matt as vice chair, and Sarah as secretary treasurer. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Todd? Maybe someday we'll be able to be in person and I can do the meeting in person at some point in time. We'll see. So that is a voting item. So I would entertain a motion for item number 7.
I'd move it.
Second.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I just have a technical one. Todd, you just said Chair Joe, Vice Chair, Secretary Treasurer is Sarah, correct?
Correct.
Well, the discussion that we had was based on your email that said Secretary Treasurer was Gary Lorenz. So
Oh.
what are we approving?
No, that was a typo. I apologize. It would be the same officers as we currently have.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Stephanie. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 8 is report and vote on the DART safety plan and targets. Z is going to give us an
Yes.
update on that.
Yep. Thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as part of the Federal Transit Administration's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, transit agencies coordinate and work with the state and MPOs during their planning process. So as part of this coordination, DOT has developed the safety plan and targets, and we'll be integrating this into our MPO planning documents. So we invited Pat Daly from DOT. He's the safety operations manager to talk more about the transit safety plan. So I'll pass it over to Pat.
Hi, good afternoon. I realize that you have a packed agenda, so I will move through these rather quickly. Please feel free if you have any questions to bring them up now or email me at a different time. I'll be happy to answer them. DART has always had safety plans. We've always been required to have safety plans. This new federal requirement is a more in-depth safety plan to ensure that we're collecting data, using risk management techniques, and that when we make changes, we're actually, to manage that risk, that we're actually going back and measuring those changes to make sure that the changes we made were effective changes. So, next slide, please. So some of the general requirements of the agency safety plan, which hasn't been required of previous safety plans, is that it is approved by the CEO and the DART Commission, that we actually go and review it and update it every year, and that we certify to the FTA by just checking a box online that we've reviewed and updated it. enforcement or the check on us is through the FTA triannual visits. When they'll pull out, take a look at the safety plan, ask us to prove that we're doing the things in the plan that we say we're going to do. The agency, the plan needs to be in compliance with the Public Transportation Safety Program and the National Safety Plan. That's where we get our safety performance targets. And the plan also must have a designated executive who's in charge of that, which is me. Next, safety. Okay. Some specific elements in the plan is that we use a safety management system. That's to collect the data, analyze it, and make sure that it's working. That we have safety performance targets, and that we have an employee reporting program. So we gather information from the people who are really out there on the front line, driving our vehicles, and get the feedback from them as to what we could do better to improve safety for them and the public. This plan, the reporting program needs to have multiple avenues of reporting: email, dropping off notes, leaving voicemails, and they need to be able to do it anonymously if they choose. Next slide, please. So these are the National Safety Plan performance measures. So we measure for each mode of travel, each mode that we deliver. So we have 3 modes, paratransit, 4 modes, fixed route, paratransit, van pool, and taxi. We put some of our paratransit people can drive by taxi, so we use taxis there. So there's 7 performance measures that we have for each mode of travel. So fatalities, injuries, both by total number and by rate per total revenue miles, safety events, and then system reliability. How long are vehicles on the road between major mechanical failures? Next slide, please. So while we've tracked this information in the past, we haven't broken it down quite like this. This is more like bringing the trees out of the forest here. We've always tracked fatalities. Injuries was kind of buried. Safety events brings in everything: collisions, slips, trips, and falls, people transported for emergencies, fires, security events, all kinds of things, which previously we had not been reporting out on that, only on accidents and injuries. So you can see there our 7 our goals for each of the modes of transport. And those were just based on the average for the previous 4 years. And I think that's it, unless anybody has any questions.
Any questions? Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is item number 8 is a voting item, so I'd entertain a motion. If there's not any comments.
Motion to approve from
Stephanie.
Sarah.
Second from Stephanie.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 9 is report and vote on the 2017-2021 safety performance targets. And Z, this is gonna.
Yep, I'll
This is
be
you.
doing this one again. Yep, thank you. So this is part of the Federal Highway Administration's Highway Safety Improvement Program. So as part of this, state and MPOs report safety performance measures. Although current regulations use this term targets, MPO committees have expressed that they do not approve of using the term targets when we talk about fatalities and serious injuries and safety performance. So in review, in 2020, the MPO planning area saw 38 fatalities, 138 serious injuries, and 27 non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. Next slide. So within your agenda packet, there was a full detailed report on how we determined all these safety performance measures. So in this table, the column on the right is our 2017 to 2021 targets. The column in the middle is the 2020 safety performance, and the column on the left is the 2015 to 2019 baseline targets. Last month, we were still working on the fatality rate based on vehicle count data within the MPO and also within Iowa statewide, we noticed about a 12% reduction in traffic flows compared to last year because of COVID. So we incorporated that number when we calculated the fatality rates and serious injury rates. And so with that, if you have any questions on these 2017 to 2021 safety targets, I'm happy to take them at this time.
Z, thank you. Any questions or comments?
I'd, as we talk about financial acumen and other needs of the MPO, I'd like to know how much time we're spending on our local and how much difference there is from the national numbers that are provided. To me, this is an issue that we've heard several times. There's no really accountability on it. It's just something that we have to buy into. I think the time spent on this could be transferred to a higher priority project, and that's taken nothing away from the good work that's happened here. I just don't see it as necessary when we could just adopt the national numbers.
Well, I would agree. I've always wondered why we don't use those numbers and what's the benefit to this report. Todd, can you help us out with that?
Well, the benefit for us, there isn't a ton other than we're required to do the reporting. The amount of time it takes to calculate isn't a lot, since we get all the calculations from the DOT on the VMT and the injury rates from the DOT. So it's not a lot to pull together. It is something that we're required to do from the feds.
We can't just use the state numbers?
We can, but they're typically worse than what we project.
But isn't I maybe misunderstand you, Chris, but isn't the point, if nothing ever really happens to these numbers, and I mean, does it make a difference if we just take the state numbers and stop doing the separate math?
I think that's my thoughts, or at least questions, Stephanie. And I've always been a little uncomfortable, and you guys have heard me say this before, setting targets on number of fatalities and all that. And if we could just avoid setting our own numbers and accepting what the state has, I don't even know how much different it is, and if it's worth the extra effort and time on our agenda and worry. Let's direct that to something that we really have to do. This is something that we voluntarily do. I know we eventually have to approve the state, but that could be easy.
We can, bring back the state rates and, for the next go around and show you the difference it would be, and how they're calculated and what that difference would look like. We can certainly do that.
Yeah, I think when you bring it back, you need to show us the benefit of doing our own numbers and what's the benefit compared to the staff time. I know you say it's minimal, but we've got a lot of stuff going on, and you know what? Maybe some of that could be used for training,
Sure.
Administratively, so we don't have any accounting errors and things like that. I mean, there's many things I'm sure you can do with Z's time than to do something like this. This isn't something I've ever been comfortable with. I've never understood why we have to pick the number of fatalities we're gonna, estimate, or it just doesn't seem right when, especially the state's already doing it.
We'll bring back both our numbers, the state numbers, and the benefits or not of doing one or the other.
Okay.
But we do need to approve this for this year.
Okay. Maybe that can be part of our motion, that you'll bring that back the next time before we approve it the next time.
Yep, certainly.
Okay.
Approve.
Okay, second, Stephanie.
All right. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 10 is report and vote on the MPO appointment to the Sudos Board of Directors. Todd, you're going to give us a quick update on that?
Yeah, real quick. The MPO has a representative that sits on the Sudos Board of Directors. They help set design standards for roadway projects. Mark Miller from the city of Ankeny has been the representative. His term is ending. He's offered to continue to serve as the MPO's representative. We did ask for nominations at the technical committee, and Mark was renominated to continue to serve as the MPO representative, and they voted to make that recommendation onto exec. So we would make that recommendation as well to approve Mark to continue for another term. Be happy to answer any questions.
I think Mark's a good guy. I'd move to reappoint Mark.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 11 is a report on the Economic Development District update. Todd.
Yep, thank you. And I'll kick this off, and then Gunnar and Andrew will probably have a few more specifics. But last fall, we brought this up to the Executive and Policy Committee, and were asked to investigate what it would take to form an economic development district and do some of the background work. We've been doing that over the past couple months, meeting with stakeholders and county boards of supervisors, and starting to move that process forward. We've of the 7 counties, 3 boards of supervisors have made a resolution of support to form a district, and the other 4 we think will happen in the next couple of weeks or early March. So it looks like this piece is moving forward. How the MPO would be involved with this would be similar to the SERPTA work that is done under a contract, and we would receive funding from there's $70,000 in federal funding, and then $70,000 local match would have to be acquired, and that would be pay for this position as long as the Economic Development District was functioning. That funding would pay for a staff person to help manage all the grants and reporting that's required.
Todd, can you say that last part again, the 70 plus 70?
Yeah, the Economic Development Administration gives $70,000 in federal funds to each economic development district to help staff it. That has to be matched by local funds of $70,000. So anybody that joins the economic development district, there would be some breakdown on the cost sharing to pay for that match money.
That's actually a piece that has been lost on me, and I'm sorry about that. And I don't think your agenda summary, I don't think it ever refers to that. I thought it was 140 that came from the feds through this program.
Yeah.
I'm glad that there's interest and people want to do it, but I guess I'd be interested in your next report on what level. I mean, people might be interested if it's free, but it starts costing money. They're not so interested in it. So maybe,
Sure.
maybe that project's one of your 4 special projects on your review for this year. I think we just have to make sure that we just don't put it on autopilot, and we really evaluate if we want to move forward on it.
Yeah, no, certainly. And we've talked with a number of communities. We actually talked with the city of Adel last night. They're very interested in subscribing, if you want to call, being a member of this. They're sending a letter to Dallas County Board of Supervisors asking them to support the formation of this. So we've had a number of conversations with different communities similar to that, willing to help support on the local cost share portion.
Todd, this is towing the line, in my opinion, of a cog. And as we went through the strategic planning process, that was definitely not something that we wanted to do. I feel like we're dipping our toes into the water by doing some of the stuff that we've been doing, especially this. It seems like a duplication of what we all contribute the partnership to do.
They're set up differently. They do
Well,
different
they might
things.
be set up differently, but the overall goal, I would say, would be very similar. I think, you're going to need to work with individual cities and see what their goals are for their economic district. I mean, to me, this is something that I'm not sure how this, I know some of it will relate to transportation, but not all of it. And I think that we're definitely dipping our toes into things that I think, as we went through the strategic planning process, that we would prefer not to do. That's just my opinion. I'm one out of you folks, so I'm just sharing that with you. I'm not sure how everyone else feels, but it's very, very close to how COG, as you read through it, you're close here, Todd.
Well, certainly COGs have economic development districts in them, but COGs do much more than economic development districts. Economic development districts focus on infrastructure and helping cities build out infrastructure. They don't recruit businesses. They don't support business retention or creation of jobs. It's the infrastructure that then allows a chamber of commerce or a partnership to go out and recruit a business to come to or expand their facilities.
And Todd, maybe what would be helpful on the Economic Development District update is these reminders about the money that's possible, because I know that was discussed many months ago, and I think a lot of us have COVID brain and can't quite keep everything in order. I know I struggled. I had to go back to that past presentation. And I was reminded of the federal money we can't go after right now. I think that would be a good thing to bring up again. And I would strongly recommend that we have a side meeting with the Greater Des Moines Partnership, and discuss, are there opportunities to leverage staffing there? Or do we actually have to have a full-time person? I don't know, but I'm always interested in partnering and using strengths in a collaborative way where possible. And I just want to make sure that we check that box to see what's possible.
Certainly, and they have been part of the presentations, and we've been involved with the partnership throughout this process, but we can certainly expand that discussion and bring back, the different projects that we've highlighted previously, water main relocation, roads, runways. There's some technical assistance that can go on as well.
Perfect. I think that would be a good refresher for all of us.
Yeah, we can bring that back next month.
Sounds good. Any other comments or questions for Todd? All right. Item number 12 is a report on the quarterly budgets. Dylan's gonna do this.
Yep. Thank you. So in the packet was the quarterly budget report through the end of December for this fiscal year's budget of what we've actually spent compared to the budgeted amount. That's in the packet for you on page 18. We did discuss this with the finance subcommittee last week. There were no questions really about this. And I do want to note, we do use this when we look at projecting into the future year's budget. So that's where it becomes important. But we're on track with pretty much everything that we have here. I would note on the top portion of this that it has our normal expenditures for kind of office related activities. And then on the bottom is pass-through expenditures. So these are for the transload and water trails grants, and also, I guess, just transload in this case. And then the very last one is a special study of funds that were awarded to West Des Moines and Clive. So it tells you what's been expended from that contract as well, which doesn't have anything to do with our staff. It's just a pass-through amount that we have in our budget. So if there's any questions about any of this, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, it's just a report for you.
Excellent. Thanks, Dylan. Any questions for Dylan? Any comments? All right. Item number 13 is report fiscal year 2022 Unified Planning Work Program and Budget Development. Dylan.
Thank you. So we'll continue talking about budget related things here. Just a reminder, if you go to the next slide, Gunnar, the budget is due The draft is due April 1st with the final due June 1st. So what we'll talk about today is more the budget side of things. We did discuss this with the Finance Subcommittee last week and incorporated, what I'll show you here incorporates some of the comments in the materials that were sent to you in the agenda packet. Those had not been addressed yet, but will be by the time this is presented next month. So if you go to the next slide, just to recap how our funding works here. You go to the next slide, Gunnar. Sorry, one more, sorry. Okay, so we get into revenue. So this shows what our revenue looks like, and I'll come back to this a little bit, but keep this number in mind here. So this shows on the top, the federal funds that we receive for our normal operations, and then below that, the non-DOT matching funds for member assessments, and then the various contracts that we have. So all told about 1.6 or 1.7 million in revenue. If you go on to the next slide, we'll look at expenses. So these expenses, again, just for the MPO operations, this includes salaries, wages, all of that kind of thing. And again, you can see there the balance of about $3,000 at the end of the year that we're projecting where our revenues are over expenditures. You go on to the next slide.
So Dylan, that obviously does not have $2,000 in for any life insurance for Todd, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I don't believe so. That hasn't been in there.
All
So
right, thank you.
Yep. If you go to the next slide, this is one of the things kind of coming back from the audit report we heard, and also a conversation we had at this finance subcommittee, is the need to include the various build and transload and water trails money in there from both a revenue as well as an expenditure. So these are the same tables I just showed you, but adding in both the build grants for water trails and transload, the revolving loan grant for transload, and the SDBG funds for water trails. They're in the federal DOT funds, as well as all the matching funds for those. And on the anticipated expenditures, that other direct costs was increased significantly to match that. At the end of the day, we're still showing the same balance because all that funding will come into the MPO and then go right back out. But from an accounting standpoint, it shows that cash flow in there so that when we look at our audit at the end of the year, all that stuff's going to show up there. So this way it matches. I would note that some of these figures might change by the time we get to the final budget, just because they're actively drawing down the transload funds for revolving loan grant. For example, we might see some build grants expenditures by then as well. So we'll continue to update that figure, but in the end, it should all shake out to the money in equals the money out, and we'll have the same difference at the end of the day.
Dylan, are you presenting these as the draft or the proposal, or is this just illustrative?
Draft right now, proposal, yeah.
So can I just ask a question on the non-DOT funds?
Sure.
On the bottom four, the matches of the two significant grants, are those real dollars, or how did you pick those?
Those would be the 20% required to match the 80% of the federal funds, because they're all on an 80-20 basis. So a lot of these, it's not going to come from MPO dues or anything like that. It's going to come from the Water Trails Consortium with the fundraising they're doing in that case, or coming from Des Moines Industrial for the transload. So there's probably going to be more for those, but this is just to match that federal fund.
Yeah. I mean, I get the requirement to do that. I hesitate to think that we have a legit budget unless, like, take that 6.2 million, that we have some contract with them that binds the River Trails group to providing us that money. And I'm not quite sure we're to that stage yet. I mean, I think we will be, but.
Yeah, we're working on those agreements right now.
I think we should stress that the agreements have a deadline, which is we're not going to pass the budget and call that revenue unless we have an agreement that it's coming in. I think it's fair for us to put a little heat on the process to get it moving along, because they have to make that commitment that they're covering that cost. I think that's their intention.
Yeah,
and I'm on the board. I mean, I don't, but I think we probably need it in writing.
Yeah.
and, and a sworn commitment.
Yeah, and we're, like I said, we're drafting that agreement right now. I met with Scott earlier this week to start tuning it, the agreement.
And Chris, part of showing this is meeting a requirement from our audit. Whereas before we simply weren't even recognizing money coming in and going out from transload, and that's where we were getting dinged. So we have to recognize it, but I 100% agree with you. And I know that Todd and team are working on those agreements because, as most of you know, I have been asking, how do we cash flow this? So I'm sure they're getting anxious to present these agreements and demonstrate how they will do that.
And one other thing on those funds too, we're showing the full amount of the build grants and what's remaining of the revolving loan fund, for example. We don't anticipate that all of that's probably going to be spent, especially on the water trails in this budget cycle, but without knowing what that is, we didn't want to take a guess that 50% of it or 25% or something. So we just put the full amount in there, figuring if we come in under budget from an audit perspective and everything, that's going to be better than way undershooting what we actually will see.
Right. Dylan, a quick question on this page, and I'm sorry I did not bring this up before. On the STBG Water Trails match, is that coming from our STBG dollars, and did we get, or what is that? And if it is our STBG dollars, did we get approval to use that for water trails?
I would defer to Todd and Zach on that, but I believe we did, it was approved to do that.
Yeah, it's been a little while ago, but we did approve using some STPG dollars for construction on water trails. I can get you the date of when that was approved. I just don't have it off the top of my head. And then the consortium would provide the match like there are for the build grant.
Sorry, not our approval. I was referring to DOT and federal government approval, since they are technically federal dollars coming to us, and then we're using federal dollars to back a federal build grant program. I thought that was a question hanging out there as to if we could even do that.
We're not matching the build grant with the STBG dollars. The STBG dollars would be paying for, some piece of the water trail project. And then that would be matched with local funds, and the build grant would be paying for, whatever on the, so they're two separate pay items essentially.
I remember that right, though. That was excess funds, and we really stress test this, and it was going to be used for, I thought, design or engineering work, not actual construction.
We talked about engineering work, and the policy committee at the time said, no, let's use it for construction. We didn't want to use it for design.
But it was excess funds, right?
Correct.
And then, Sarah, that generated the request for a policy on, let us know when there's excess funds and how much, because both Wandro and Haddon didn't even know we had that excess money.
Right.
All right.
Any other
discussion?
I do have, if you go to the next slide, I do have a few things I wanted to mention on the next that gets into a little bit more of this. So on the left-hand side, the non-direct costs that were included in there, in addition to the build projects, we have $5,000 set aside for strategic planning, $10,000 for model assistance, and $15,000 each for speaker series and container locator data. This is similar to what we've done in the past, so this is just continuing because these are kind of reoccurring things. And the contracts also remain the same as what we've seen in previous years with SERPA, the Watershed Management Housing Trust Fund, and Melcher Dallas. On the right, we have some additional assumptions and questions, I guess, for discussion here. As discussed during the audit portion, we did include adding a full-time staff position for administrative services, but added it starting in the third quarter. So only half of that salary, benefits, and so forth is in this budget. That is still, that's kind of a placeholder, if you will. So if that goes to be more of a contract or consultant, that can change, but the money's in there to reflect that. We also assumed $1 per capita in assessments. Last year, we dropped that down to 50 cents. So we assume that will go back up. If we want to change that, that'll change some revenue, scenarios, obviously, but just for what it's worth, that was the assumption going in. And then previously, there was some discussions on the sponsorships that we have, particularly for a few organizations that we give money to every year. So we did reduce that sponsorships dollar. So we have now $35,000 for sponsorships. We typically do about 30,000 to Capital Crossroads. So that'd leave 5,000 left over for something else. The one that came up previously was the Street Collective and whether we should continue to sponsor that. And I think back in July or August, we had a discussion about wanting to maybe move off of that a little bit and not support them at such a high level and make them a little more self-sufficient without our funds. So we did try to reflect that in here too. All of this can still be changed. Obviously, it's just a draft right now, but that is what we have done.
And I will add, Mayor Gary, you recommended that finance discuss the sponsorships, and so we did, and this is part of our recommendation. I did ask Todd to talk with the team behind Capital Crossroads because I know that Todd said there's going to be a next phase, and so I wanted to understand our return on investment, how many people are participating, are they more successful, less successful, and what are the projects that we would have leadership on to make sure it met our needs. And then additionally, as it relates to the Bicycle Collective, we could consider supporting them if there was a project that had some tight parameters around that would actually help move forward some of the work that the MPO is leading. But otherwise, like Dylan said, that has been reduced. And then as the Secretary Treasurer, I would really emphasize that I strongly recommend and support that this conversation around a potential person or consultant be a finance-focused individual. I think that's the benefit of the organization and every single one of us sitting around the table. While I know we all have to decide moving forward what decision we make, that would be my strong recommendation, again, that it is a finance person or consultant.
So this could be a third party. Instead of hiring someone full-time, we can look at someone doing third party as far as more of a checks and balance. They can do the payroll. They can, go through and make sure everything's categorized correctly. As far as an accountant could do a lot of those things. And
yeah, we left the option open. We do payroll outside of, we have a payroll company that does our payroll.
Okay. I would get some bids on what that would be a third party to kind of go through. Stephanie, I think, brought that up before. I think it would probably be less than hiring a full-time administrative person to use a third party. And we would definitely, if we're looking at checks and balances, that solves it right there. Where someone outside of the organization is looking at it on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
And that's beneficial for you too, Todd. That way, as we go through an audit, you don't, it's not all on you that we've made the corrections that we need.
Yeah, no, we discussed yesterday that we'll come up with a couple proposals and bring that back to the group to take a look at.
One strategy that I'd encourage, although I can't really picture how it would work, is an agreement with another 2080 organization locally, where maybe combined we could build out a pretty good accounting team person. I think of Metro Waste Authority or others, where maybe instead of going to a private contractor, we contract with another group that we're all already funding.
That's a good idea. Any other questions or comments for Todd or the staff?
Just one comment, and not to take away from anything Gunner's been doing, but are we getting $15,000 worth of advantage from our speaker series? I'll admit I've never been to one, but it just seems like an awful expensive.
Yeah, in previous years, that number, last year it was about 15,000 too, but in previous years it was a lot higher than that. And over the course of the speaker series, we've created a committee, and there's other organizations that are partners now that also contribute to it. So our funding of it has dropped way back because it's become more of a thing. This year, just with COVID, we haven't had as many events or as many in-person events. But we do anticipate continuing that. And we've already had some interest from some other organizations that want to be part of the speaker series and would bring speakers in. So even though we put the 15,000 out there, we don't always necessarily need that just because we have other organizations coming to the table.
I see. Okay. And then the container locator, that's a revenue generator, isn't it?
We're working on that. It's been a work in progress. We think we've got a line to make it a much better revenue generator for us than it has been.
Right.
But it does provide a unique opportunity for shippers to find shipping containers, which is helps transport goods through the state.
Right.
I did bring up at our budget review meeting the comments that were made at the county assessor annual board meeting. Just made sure that staff understood that while going into this next fiscal year, the cities, clearly are dealing with some challenges, but 21 is a reassessment year. And based on the assessor's comments, there could be and will be some significant swings as we move into our next budgets. And so we are going to have to be mindful for demonstrating value and how we are using tax dollars to move all these projects forward. That's clearly out a couple of years, but I wanted to make sure that we discussed that and had that on our radar, recognizing what all of us will be going through in our next round of budgets.
All right, any other comments or questions? Move on to item number 14 is a report on FY 2022-2025 Transportation Improvement Program Development. Shiroshi.
Yes, thank you very much. As you all know, this is about the time that the MPO begins developing the Transportation Improvement Program, which is a document that includes a comprehensive report on all projects in the region that have received federal funding. So we have or are kicking off this process for this year. And over the next few weeks, we'll be reaching out to all our member communities to get input on projects in their communities that have received federal funding. And once we have received input from them, we are going to be ready with a draft report by the end of May, following which the document is up for public comment and review. We take all input and make any necessary changes or corrections that need to be made based on the input. And then following that, we have a final report ready that is submitted or is required to be submitted to the DOT by July 15th of 2021. So this is just a heads up that this process is beginning. And with that, if you have any questions about the TIP development process and schedule, I'll be happy to answer at this time. Thank you.
Sure, Shiroshi, thank you. Any questions or comments?
I apologize. This is Sarah again. Either Shiroshi or Todd, as we move forward with water trails, I think it's going to be really important that we make it clear to the board what the addition of water trails into TIP will look like and what that means. We can all either be completely fine with it or have comments or concerns, but recognizing that that will be an addition, we need to make sure everyone fully understands that.
Yeah, it'll be in the TIP once, when we sign the build grant agreement, it'll go into the TIP or potentially prior to that, getting clarification on that. It's similar to what we did with the transload build grant that was put in the TIP as well. But yeah, we can certainly show that and how that will show up in the TIP.
Good idea. Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to item 15, report FY 2025 Surface Transportation Block Grant applications. Zach.
Yes, we just want to give you a quick update on the applications that were submitted for federal fiscal year 2025 STBG funding. They were due back on January 15th. In total, we received 22 applications. You can see how many applications we received in each of the various different categories there on your screen. The total request this year is $39.8 million, a little bit over that. We're going to have roughly probably $13 million to award. We should be getting the official number from the DOT towards the end of this month, but it should be around $13 million we'll have to award out to funding to projects. Next slide. As far as the schedule goes, we have the presentations set up on March 18th. So the applicants will come in and present to the funding subcommittee on that date. And then there'll be a follow-up meeting of the funding subcommittee on March 31st, where they'll develop their recommendation for funding. And then we'll bring the committee's recommendation to the committees in April, and then have approval of the funding awards in May. So that's a brief overview of the applications we've received, as well as the schedule moving forward. I'd be happy to take any questions if you have them.
Thanks, Zach. Any questions for Zach? Zach, I do have one quick question, and I don't even know if you can answer it right now, but as I go through the list, Cowles Drive at the Des Moines International Airport, I mean, that really isn't hardly even a public road. I mean, so I'm not sure how a major reconstruction or replacement, I mean, we're looking at $5 million for that. And I'm all for the airport expansion and things like that, and be supportive of it. But, you know, I know it's in the city of Des Moines, but it is a regional airport. And I guess I'm just confused how that can get in the STBG funding. It's not even, I mean, it's more of a walking trail for people. I mean, there's hardly any cars that use that stretch.
I think they're redoing the whole entrance to the airport, and that's what they're naming that.
Well, there's one that's phase 2 and 3. That's 2.6, but phase 4 is the terminal road. So we're gonna. I don't know.
What I can tell you is that under federal guidelines, these projects are eligible activities. So the airport has submitted those applications. I think it's something that the funding subcommittee will probably discuss in depth when it comes time to develop a recommendation as to whether or not they want to provide funding to those projects.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions for Zach? All right. Item 16. Go ahead.
I think you raised an important question, which is, we probably philosophically have to have a discussion about how the MPO wants to approach the airport project. As you can tell from Joe and my two comments, it's not really a city of Des Moines project. We didn't know it was on the list till we read the list. There's and so I think as a region, we really kind of like the water trails money that we talked about. How are we going to approach this with our limited transportation dollars? And that's a regional decision.
Yeah, and Chris, this is Steve. I guess what I've done in the past is written our congressional group about increasing the that daily fee. That's what really needed to complete it. And it seems like we can support the ability to do that, because it seems like these, airlines can charge $25 for your bag. They can charge you $5 for a glass of water or whatever, but they're fighting us on another $4.25. So, for what it's worth, I've been writing those letters every year because I think that's the key to that project.
Steve, I think that is the key to the project as well. But I did ask city staff just about the overall budget, and their impression is that if we were successful in raising that, it still generates less than half the needed money for the terminal project.
Okay, that's news to me, because I thought they had the money and they could get covered with that fee. So I thought they'd made some pretty significant reductions in the project, but I haven't gotten an update for a long time. Might be good to have Foley come in and give us an update then. He's done that in the past.
I think that's a great idea, Steve.
I know they did do a lot of value engineering to tighten up the budgets on the airport. They will be bonding for part of that as part of their financing. But yeah, we can have Kevin come and give a presentation.
All right, that sounds good. Any other questions or comments? Item 16 is a report for the priority project list for the annual DC trip. Zach.
Yes, just wanted to give you a quick update on where we're at with developing the updated priority project list. Over the last couple of months, we've been working with the member governments to get updates to this list. Including your agenda packet is the most updated version of the list with the project listed. In that list, the funding subcommittee will be reviewing this on March 31st. I'm anticipating that there may be a few communities who give us a few more tweaks to this list prior to that meeting on the 31st. The funding subcommittee will review it and then provide their recommendation back to the exec and policy committees for final approval of that list. I think the one thing I would note on this list is that, unlike in the past where we, for the past number of years, we have not had earmarks, there is a chance that something like that might be coming back. We have heard some rumors of that. If that were the case, this list would kind of be the starting point for projects that would be eligible for those earmark type funds that might be available. Otherwise, like I said, the list is in the agenda packet. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thanks, Zach. Any questions? Go ahead.
Did the trip get moved to September?
Yes.
It did. Yes.
So do we need to kind of hold on maybe finalizing the list until it gets a little bit closer, not knowing what could happen with DC leadership and the ongoing pandemic?
I can check with the partnership, but last I saw, it looked like they were keeping the same schedule for developing their policy book.
Okay.
Todd, do you recall?
Yeah, they are, and they're also trying to stay in front of the committees while they're potentially putting together an infrastructure package prior to that September trip. So that's part of the reason we want to keep it current as possible. We'll review it before September as well, but if we can get some updates, we can get that in front of our federal delegation as they're looking at the new transportation infrastructure package.
Okay.
I suspect that if something like earmarks do come back, we're going to have to take a second look at this list anyway when that happens.
All right. Next item is a report on the transload facility, item 17.
Thank you. Continuing moving forward. Oops, this transload. Sorry, Zach.
That's all right.
Yep.
As Todd said, we're continuing to move forward on the transload project. Just have a couple of quick things we wanted to update you on regarding the project. The first thing is that on January 28th, Des Moines Industrial did close on the real estate deal with the city of Des Moines, as well as their track rights agreements and acquisitions with the railroads. So that was a big step that has been, a long time coming, and we're moving forward with that. So wanted to let you know that's happening. Moines Industrial is going to start doing site clearing. I think in the agenda packet, it said the week of February 8th. Unfortunately, the weather has kind of impacted that, and they're not going to be able to get onto the site and start doing site clearing until the week of the 22nd. So they'll be doing that here in a week or so. They're still on track and scheduled to break ground in mid-March. I think on the next slide is kind of a overview of the schedule moving forward. Just for your interest, but you can see that a lot of the work is going to start ramping up here in the next few months, and they still plan to have the project substantially completed, possibly even operational later this year.
Excellent. Any questions for Zach? Thank you for the update, Zach. Item 18 is a report on the Purple Heart Highway from Todd.
Yep, sorry, I jumped the gun on that one.
You're all right.
Go to the next slide. Continuing to move forward on the various pieces of this. As I mentioned, the overall conclusions were the same and the costs have come down. We have added a couple costs. And I think I shared an email with some of you about the DOT sent an email earlier this week mentioning that once an interstate conversion takes place, they want to change out the markings to the markings they use on an interstate. That cost for that 24-mile segment is approximately $760,000. They would like the MPO to share in that cost to the amount of about $276,000. And then the maintenance gates that are along the corridor, they'd like to remove those and put in permanent fencing. And they would like the MPO to assist with that cost. So that's pretty small cost. Next slide. Here's one. The DOT task force has been formed. Farm Bureau asked to meet with us, so we've got a tentative date. They're working to confirm that on their end. Also talking with the governor's office to set up a meeting there. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Todd? All right, we'll move on to the next item. Item 19 is a water trails update from Todd.
Yeah, thank you. Next slide. You can see we've done a lot of coordination with the various entities that we have to get permits and agreements with. NEPA documentation will be done on the 21st and hopefully approval on April. I also have Gabe Nelson on the line. He's from Schneider and Associates that is helping coordinate the design work. I'm going to ask Gabe to mention kind of where they're at with some of the big design items. Go ahead, Gabe.
Yeah, good afternoon. From a design standpoint, we've turned in kind of the end of the year, beginning of January, turned in preliminary plans for all 4 sites to the Iowa DOT and the city of Des Moines. Towards the end of January, we received comprehensive comments, and we're working through those comments on the plans themselves. We've also turned the project into we're kind of in the final stages of the environmental review process. As far as we've turned the project into the State Historical Preservation Office right now. They're in their comment period right now. Once the Iowa DOT has recommended a finding of no effect related to the historical nature of the dam. Once we have that, then we can finalize our environmental document associated with that in the next couple months. A number of permitting agencies that we've been coordinating with right now, namely the Corps of Engineers and the Iowa DNR, have made submittals to them, and they're in their review process right now, and we'll be addressing any comments as they come up. So that's things like wetlands and levees and the outgrant at Prospect Park, because the Corps of Engineers actually owns Prospect Park. So working through a number of approvals as far as that goes. And then a number of approvals as far as the city of Des Moines as well. I'm sure you've seen some articles in the paper. That's really related to more of the use of water trails. So that's been the Zoning Board of Adjustment with the conditional use permits, the zoning at Harriet Street site. That's been approved by the Planning and Zoning Committee and going to City Council. So we're also starting to work through a number of the City of Des Moines boards. So the regional sites have been approved by the Urban Design Review Board. And then the Scott Avenue, we expect that to gain approval here in another month from that board. And then we're going to start working through like the City of Des Moines Park Board and ultimately the City Council. So that's kind of where we sit right now. Still working forward to that fall of this year letting for the project through the Iowa DOT. As Todd had mentioned earlier, we're also working on a number of agreements, not only for just the amount of the funding, but then just the detail of the mechanism for funding and how that actually works in construction and how the oversight of construction goes. So the agreements will touch a number of those points. And as Todd mentioned, we're starting to work through that, some of those details as well. So any questions for me?
Any questions, anybody?
This is Sarah. I don't have a question, but more so a comment. I was just really appreciative that we got to have that water trails conversation. Gosh, was that this week or last week? It's all blending together. But Mr. Coleman brought up a really great solution that I thought really was addressing my worry and concern over so many governmental entities and the long length of this project and who's involved. And Mr. Coleman recommended that for maybe quarterly updates that were signed by our federal rep, possibly our state rep, and then Todd, because my big concern is making sure that we remain in compliance with our build grant, but have affirmations from our federal regulators that we are meeting what they've asked for, and that they agree that what we've given them is appropriate, and that they can't come back later and say it's not what they asked for. So thank you, Chris, for that recommendation. I thought that was a really great idea.
Yeah, and I've talked with Paul and we'll make that happen at Federal Highway, so and the DOT, but specifically I was talking with Paul since they have to sign off on everything. But yeah, definitely make that happen.
All right. Thank you, Todd. We'll move on unless anyone else has any questions about water trails. Move on to item 20. It's a legislative update from Dylan.
Joe, I've got one quick question on that.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Gary. I apologize.
Well, I apologize if I've asked this before, but if I have, I've forgotten the answer. Who currently owns the 3 dams right now? Is that Des Moines, the Corps, or a combination of the two? Or
The city of Des Moines owns Scott Street and then Center Street, and I believe the Fleur Dam as well. Yes.
so does that change? Does that ownership change with the project?
No.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Item 20 is a legislative update from Dylan.
Thank you. We have two main things I want to talk to you about. One is a recap or a kind of a update on something we discussed last time, which has to do with the federal COVID recovery bill. We've got a little more clarification on how this is intended to work based on the DOT commission meeting yesterday. There's about $122 million that is coming to the Iowa DOT. Yesterday, when they met, they reviewed a proposal from the DOT staff of how this would be broken down. And you can see the figures up there. Basically, 55.5 million would stay with the DOT for their use. 38 million would go to counties, about 23 million would go to cities, and 5 million would go to trails. If you recall last time we spoke, in the federal legislation, it says that MPOs over 200,000 will receive a allocation. Our allocation is about 4.5 million. What the DOT is suggesting is that 4.5 million would be allocated through the road use tax formula. So we wouldn't receive an allocation similar to our SDBG funds. The money would just go to the communities through this road use tax formula. And that's not necessarily, basically the money that would go to the MPO communities in our area would equal 4.5 million allocated through the road use tax. If we were to want to opt out of that, we can, but then we'd have to come up with a mechanism to basically have the communities to return that money to the DOT. So anyway, that's what's being proposed. And because the legislation says that basically 4.5 million has to be spent of the federal money in the Des Moines area, the DOT will work with us to identify a project that normally would use state funds on, but they'll use federal funds on and do a swap. So hopefully that's clear as mud of what they're proposing. Right now, this is just a proposal. They are going out for input from stakeholders because we didn't have any, any insight into this before it was announced yesterday. So now they're going to reach out and work with us, and we'll get some more details probably. And then this will be presented for a recommendation at the March 9th commission meeting to be implemented. And once it's implemented, they want to get the money out as quickly as possible. So I don't know if there's any questions or feedback on this at this time.
Any questions for Dylan? Feedback on this?
I mean, the question I guess I would have for members is that, the 4.5 going through the road use tax fund, it means everybody gets a little bit in the metro, whereas the 4.5 could be used on a couple of projects to really finish them off if we brought it to the MPO. So it's just something to think about. And as Dylan said, this is new to how they were going to do it to us. So we just wanted to bring it to your attention.
Seems like every city ought to get a little bit because we've all suffered a lot versus some cities not getting anything.
No.
I would agree with that.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
If you go to the next slide, we've got an update on a few federal pieces of legislation. One we talked about last time, it was House File 304. By the time it was called something different. This is for the personal delivery devices. This has been amended a little bit to allow cities to ban them outright or to restrict them to specific districts. This did pass the House the other day, a couple days ago. So that's one that's moving forward. There's a few other here, one that would prohibit local governments from using automated traffic enforcement devices. This seems to come up about every year. The next one there, House Study Bill 80 or Senate File 97 is kind of interesting as it relates to electric bicycles. And this is something we see more of. Basically, it would change the definition of a bicycle to include electric bicycles. And so they wouldn't be treated as vehicles or motorcycles. And basically anyone on an electric bicycle would have the same rights as any other bicyclist, including where they can operate and so forth. So that might restrict what communities can do as far as limiting the use of e-bikes. We have a hands-free driving bill that just kind of further takes that a little bit further than what current law says. Basically, you can only use them if you're voice activated or in hands-free mode. And then there's one that relates to more watershed work that we're doing. House File 241 would allow a county to adopt and enforce stream buffers, basically. That's a quick rundown. We'll continue to watch these, but if there's anything you'd like us to do with any of these or any questions, be happy to address those.
Dylan, what happened to the, there was some stormwater bill that would.
Yeah, there was the language from the Home Builders Association. To my knowledge,
Right.
that has not been introduced yet.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Dylan, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Dylan? Item 21 is upcoming events from Gunner.
Good afternoon, everyone. One event to make sure you are aware of coming up very soon here. The RAIN campaign is helping to put on a rain garden training. It's 2 days, 2 mornings, free and online. Topic includes all rain gardening basics as well as design guidelines, layouts, maintenance, funding options, etc. Registration info is on the screen there. Otherwise, it's a quick Google. That's it for me, unless you have any questions.
Any questions for Gunner? Gunner, thank you. Item 22 is a vote on the approval of the MPO policy agenda for February 18th at 4 o'clock.
I have one question for Scott, or is Scott still on? There he is. Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
You mentioned that we couldn't take action on Todd's $2,000. Is his review on the full MPO committee?
Yes.
Do we have time to notice it if we added it to the report there?
Yeah.
I think you do, don't you?
Yeah,
Yes.
we won't send that agenda out till tomorrow. So
I would
Well-
prefer to make that a separate agenda item because I would otherwise vote no because I am not in agreement with working outside the bounds of a contract.
That's fine. You can make it a separate agenda item, Todd, and we'll just vote on it then. Otherwise, it'll be part of your review the next time.
okay, so add an
I'll
item
move,
to
I'll move the
policy
agenda with that added to it.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 23 is other non-action items of interest to the committee. Anyone have anything? Todd, you have anything?
Not at this time.
All right. Our next meeting date is March 10th at 11:30. I assume we'll still be on Zoom, so we'll see everyone then. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you for being patient. This was a lengthy agenda.
Yeah, it's a big agenda. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.